A very good morning. You're welcome along to Tuesday morning's OTB AM. As ever, if you want to get in touch with us, you can just leave a comment on whatever stream you're watching. We're live on YouTube. We're live on Periscope. The best way to get that is through Twitter, of course. And we're also live on Facebook. If you want to just listen to us as a breakfast radio show, then feel free to log on to offtheball.com and click the big live and the listen button in the top right-hand corner. And then you can minimise us and go about your day. Owen, how are you?
Good, how are you?
We'll talk Game of Thrones later so that anybody who hasn't seen it yet doesn't feel like we're going to spoil it for them. But so we'll do that at the very end of the show this morning. But are you happy or sad?
Meh, it's how I kind of feel. It's in the middle. Neither happy nor sad.
That's your critical assessment of the episode. But are you
no,
happy?
neither.
That it's over.
I feel empty. That it's over?
Yeah.
I'm actually kind of happy it's done. You know, one less thing to think about every week, which is always a positive. Like, we will verge into the idea of spoilers if you ask me how I feel about an episode or how I feel that it's over.
No, how you feel that your relationship, 2011 it started, it's 2019, that's 8 years.
Mm-hmm. Well, only a couple of weeks at the start of the summer for those few years. Like, it's a big part, but it's gone now. It's not like television used to be. You can just pick up something new on demand at this point, like it was in 2011 anyway, and you can just get stuck into something new. I will find something to replace the...
download most of the stuff in 2011 now. It's like sitting right there on your TV when you get home.
Yeah, well, that is true. We definitely don't illegally download Game of Thrones, for sure. Like that, you just got to find a new thing to fill that void in your life now. It could be cycling, for example.
Hey.
It could be doing a triathlon,
yeah.
For example.
Yeah.
Because, of course...
Is there anything you want to tell us?
Well, we got our bike. We were sitting here.
Our bike. We got one bike between us. We're going to do a tandem.
Got a bike each. We of course, we're doing the triathlon on June 15th in Dunmore East for Pieta House, the BMW Triathlon Ireland one. And we were sitting here and we were doing the cycle, Jar and I, and we were thinking, is there one issue? Do we have a problem here? No, it's fine. We'll just get up on our bike. Oh, wait, hold on a minute. We actually don't have any bikes. And the good folks out at Cycle Superstore in Tala, the biggest bike store in all of the UK and Ireland, invited us out, fitted us for bikes, watched me stumble on my bike a little bit while cycling around the car park, and have sorted us out with bikes. And we are good to go. The training can begin in earnest.
It's like falling off a log, though, cycling a bike. You never forget it, right? It came straight back to you. There was an immediate sense of, I'm going to be able to do this. I'm going to be great on this, right?
But speak for yourself. For me, it was kind of a sense of, if I can stay up straight on this skinny wheel, which is about 1 millimetre wide, then I'll be very, very happy with myself. I might wear knee pads and elbow pads when I do the triathlon. Might level the playing field a bit more as well. So that's basically the void in my life that's going to be filled. Just cycling all the time.
And your trash talk?
Oh, sorry, I forgot I was on air there for a moment. The triathlon in which I'm going to pulverise the other team by about 20 minutes.
So
me and my teammates.
Thinking like, a tenner a second in the spread. So, what would that be? 60 seconds, 600 quid for every minute that you beat me by. I'll happily.
Where are you coming up with the tenner a second from? Nathan already put a monetary wager on it yesterday, with the team who loses giving €100 each to Pieta House, which is, of course, a very worthy cause. But fortunately for me, it'll be you donating to that very worthy cause.
Nathan's on your team, isn't he?
Yes, he is.
He goaded you into gambling yesterday.
Yeah, that didn't really work out. I think we're all getting confused as to who's actually against who here. It's happened a couple of times.
Yeah. It has definitely happened a couple of times. But so that's all for good cause.
Yeah, no, but on a serious, like, I know I was kind of being tongue-in-cheek there when I said I was falling off the bike. On a serious note, it's actually kind of sad, the sort of level of desolation with which our team is going to leave you in.
Oh, look, there we are. There you go.
That was last week. When we got fitted for the bikes, picked them up yesterday. Did you go for a cycle on yours yesterday?
Yeah, like 15 yards, because my kids were screaming, I want to go with you, and they were standing outside. So I was like, I could just leave them standing outside, and whatever happens, happens.
Can you not get like a trailer for your bike? Is that not like a thing that modern parents do, where they attach trailers?
Not fancy bikes like our ones.
Like, you couldn't do it on yours? If you're going to be able to cycle up a hill in Dunmore East, you're able to cycle your kids along in a trailer.
I mean, this is the problem with your generation, Owen. You expect to be dragged along, as opposed to like doing it yourself. They can cycle that bloody hill themselves.
Do you think they'd be able to keep up with you? They probably would, to be fair.
Yeah, exactly.
I'd be more afraid taking on your kids than I would be taking on you.
Yeah, well, is that what you're saying? Is that where this is going? Oh,
well, that's the truth. That's the truth. Maybe I'll attach a trailer onto...
How much are you going to beat me by?
To be honest with you, we need to actually just get out on the hill in Howth tomorrow evening and just figure out the exact sort of scale of the domination that's going to occur for me to actually put a number on it.
All right. So thanks very much to Robbie Woodcock and Seán out in Cycle Superstore in Tala. I was very impressed by that bike shop. Like, you don't expect to be that impressed by a shop, but you walk in, you're like, whoa, the size of this thing. It's pretty impressive.
You've always been banging on about motors and bikes.
Yeah.
You got the opportunity to try one.
Turns out they're great. they're absolutely amazing, and they would completely fix the traffic problem in our city if everybody's got on a motorised bike.
Mm-hmm. Well, that'll never happen in terms of actually people being in the city being friendly to bicycles or people on bikes. But it's like somebody just takes you and pushes you down a hill.
In the city centre, see what happens.
Yeah, it could do. But like I was making this point last Friday, it's like I could win like I know I'm a fantastic cyclist, but I would win the Tour de France on one of those motorised bikes.
You probably wouldn't. I don't think you would, actually. I think the pros will be faster than you on one of those motorised bikes.
But no, if I'm on a motor and all the pros aren't.
Yeah, exactly. I still think they're faster than you.
Sure, man.
I'm nearly 100% sure that, like...
Barely needs to pedal on those things.
Even then, you have to pedal. And I'm thinking hour 4 up the side of Alpe d'Huez, Chris Froome is zooming past you, and you're like, that guy's far too fast.
What are you suggesting? Well, okay, I'm talking flat stage.
Flat stage, one stage, team time trial where there's people...
Okay, I'm talking for the first 40 seconds of a stage.
Yeah, I think...
Where it's like from a standing start, somebody just goes zooming. That is me. I led the Tour de France for 40 seconds is going to be the line engraved on my tombstone.
Yeah, for 40 seconds on a cheating motorised bike.
Yeah, well, that's the way to go.
You get to keep your jersey, apparently. Right, so... what else do you want to talk about? You've got this preposterous idea that football's a superior. This is fairly typical of you. So actually,
we'll come back to that in the papers.
Okay.
We're doing a piece later on with Seán Crosson, who's written a book called Gaelic Games and Film, and really, it's a great opportunity for us to read the book, go through Gaelic Games on film, and just sit and actually watch the films that he actually speaks about. There's a couple of great examples from like Jason Statham to the classic Knock na Gao, the book that was turned into a silent film, the early days, and the book goes into the vast kind of reasoning that you could use to look at Gaelic Games and film and kind of deduce what people abroad thought of Ireland. And one of those perhaps is this film Rooney, which was released in 1958, I think. Excuse me if I'm wrong there, but have a look at this.
Blind or mad? Throw that big muck pusher off the field! That was no foul. That's Rooney nearly scalped the lad. And hasn't he got hair in his head a foot long? I tell you, it was a dirty foul. Wouldn't it take a mowing machine to scalp him? Who says so? Stop crying and take a baiting like a man.
All right, I'll give you a bigger one myself.
Are you talking to me, are you?
I'm talking to any of you chicken-headed men who cares to listen to me.
Hey, is that the whistle? It was. Oh, somebody handed me a clout in there that's deafened me for life.
I'm sure I'm in for another black guy, and I just got rid of the first one.
There you go. I recognise the trees. That's Vincent's.
Yeah, it's Vincent's. It's a UK
jerseys as well.
Yeah, you're right. Actually, it's hard to make it out with the lack of colour, but filmed in Vincent's the story of I think a bin man who was a Gaelic Games star at the weekends. I need to actually go back and watch the full thing. I just looked at clips for the purposes of the interview, and it was made in the.
Get it? So is it on YouTube?
It's on YouTube. The full thing's on YouTube.
Right, okay.
Pretty much, well, a lot of the things we'll be talking about in that piece later on are on YouTube in full, including, as I say, Knock Nagao, the silent film, fully available by a couple of channels actually on YouTube. That's beyond copyright at this point. But it's interesting kind of looking at Rooney made outside of Ireland as to what exactly the view was of Irish sport and Irish sports people and people who attend hurling
50s.
matches in the 1950s. And
a fight on the sideline.
I dare say that that's not too far from the
happened.
truth. Not from the truth, from the actual true perception that they might have had.
Yeah. But sure, there's never any fights on the sidelines. Certainly not in the terraces of Tipperary matches. That video went out yesterday.
No, that's for sure. That was mad.
Well, the guy throwing the haymakers with the right hand, like up to that, it's just a bit of. It looks like a mosh pit from a bad indie gig, and
I didn't realise that sort of stuff still happens at Gaelic Games matches.
yeah.
Like fair, not fair enough, but you might be a little bit more sympathetic towards rival clans battering each other on the sideline. But maybe that's what they are. Maybe they are rival clans within Tipperary or something.
Or maybe they all got in the same bus afterwards and were laughing about it, and they're like, "Oh, now we're internet sensations."
Maybe.
Not a great look. Not a steward in sight. Not a guard in sight. You know.
Well, we don't know how quickly it did spin out of control. It could have just been right there and then. And the game maybe was so engrossing that the stewards had to watch the game.
Yeah, I mean, at that stage it wasn't, though. Like, Tip were... I don't know what period of the day this was. Was this pre-match? Was it post-match?
I have no idea.
It's a good question. Yeah, I haven't... I don't know. There was definitely some League of Ireland fans slightly pointing out tangentially, oh, I wonder what would happen if this was, Bulls and Rovers doing this. And you can bet that there will be a good bit more made out of it.
Yeah, well, that's for sure. And
I don't really remember that much trouble ever on GAA terraces.
No, very little actually.
So, like, it's important that when it happens, it's acknowledged and it's, talked about, and we say this won't be tolerated.
You often hear a sarcastic cheer from a terrace, and you look up and there's a...
Lads fighting.
Not really two lads fighting. It's usually a Garda gone up and is escorting a man or woman away from the ground, and they miss the second half of the game. But very rarely do you see all hell break loose and people actually it must be a horrendous sight of you actually at the game. It's easy for us to watch it on a mobile phone and say, well, that's kind of distasteful. But if you're actually in the middle of a game, or if there's actually kids around and stuff like that, that's it's horrible.
Yeah, no, exactly. Here's what's coming up on the show today. Got a very busy show for you. Brendan Menton's going to join us around about 8 o'clock this morning. He is the former chief executive of the FAI. He's been writing extensively on his own blog about what he thinks has been going on in the FAI, and he hasn't actually spoken publicly since last week's council meeting, so it'll be interesting to get his take on the very latest developments there and on the Noel Mooney appointment. Graham Hunter's going to join us around about 8:20. We'll talk about Zinedine Zidane, we'll talk about the future of Gareth Bale, we'll talk a bit about Pep Guardiola, we'll talk about Xavi as well, who has formally announced his full retirement from playing, although actually he retired a couple of years ago. Nicky Lauda passed away overnight at the age of 70, most famous really for his recovery from horrific burns injuries at, was it the Nürburgring? Certainly the German Grand Prix anyway. Yeah, that's coming your way. We'll talk about that around about 8:40. Podge Collins is going to join us in the studio around about 10 to 9 this morning. And the GAA on film, that interview. Looking forward to that because there's plenty of other examples. Did you mention Jason Statham?
Yeah, we probably can't play it this early in the morning due to the fact that there is horrendous language in it.
He drops a C-bomb.
Not him.
Somebody else.
So it's in Blitz, released in 2011, and Jason Statham approaches a gang of youths who are carjacking a poor individual
In Dublin.
No, I don't know where Blitz is. I've never actually seen Blitz. It could be. I don't think
Ireland?
I don't think so, no.
Okay.
Because you'll know it's not Ireland when you hear the English accents and there's a C-bomb drop and there's kind of like, what are you going to do? And all that sort of stuff. And Jason Statham tells him what he's going to do. He's got a hurl over his shoulder and he's like...
Oh, he's Ben Gilroy.
He's like, have you blokes ever heard of a game called hurling? It's a cross between hockey and murder. And then he proceeds to actually knock the living daylights out of him.
I'm reliably informed. South East London.
So that's what happens there. So when he has to explain a hurling, you know it's not Ireland.
All right, let's give you the newspapers this morning. I'm going to start with the Irish Sun this morning. Gunners tough on Freeze. So Arsenal have decided that, fool me once, shame on me. Fool me a million times, shame on me again. And again and again and again and again. Apparently now they've decided it's a bad idea to allow their players reach the final 2 years of their contracts. So instead what they're going to do is give massive pay increases to everybody who's just about good enough to be at the club but not that good enough to attract any transfer attention. Hats off Pep, his classy tribute is City Parade trophies. So the wave of anti-Manchester City stuff has passed, and now all the newspapers are today celebrating Manchester City because they had an open-top bus parade. That's all it takes to change the news agenda. Arrivederci, he's number one choice for Juventus. Maurizio Sarri wants a quick decision on his Chelsea future with Juve ready to pounce. If you're Sarri, you're getting out of Chelsea, right? If the same money is available to go somewhere like Juventus, particularly, you're getting the hell out of Chelsea.
Have Chelsea actually sorted out their situation with Antonio Conte yet? I don't think they have.
They still own the money.
Like, Chelsea just have a queue of people lined up outside Stamford Bridge waiting for their money to actually rest in their account.
And then Harry Kane is fit for who knew Harry Kane was going to make it to be fit for the Champions League final? If Spurs play Harry Kane in the Champions League final, it will bite them in the ass.
If they start him.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the common conception now is that it will actually, or the common misconception is that Harry Kane being fit would be a good thing for Spurs from the start. Personally, I get the whole idea why you wouldn't start Harry Kane in this situation, given a lack of match sharpness and given what's actually gotten there over the last round. But say in an alternate reality, if he was fully match fit, if they had 2 Premier League games going into it, you start Harry Kane.
Yeah, but he's not fit.
Well, that's the thing. He's not going to be match sharp.
No.
But you would like to think he'll get back to close to full fitness, but then actually being fully match sharp is a completely different thing. The Times have an interesting one this morning. They lead with All-Ireland League moves a step closer. It's John Fallon's story, and it's about an All-Ireland League. Niall Quinn involved in this, and clubs and cross-border associations are meeting to join forces for an all-Ireland league. The initial suggestion that there'll be 14 teams, 8 from the League of Ireland and 6 Irish League representatives, and there'll be a new era of football. Niall Quinn already sounding out potential sponsors and television broadcasters. Of course, this has been something that's come up before, 2008. Most recently, Fintan Jury was involved in that proposal. There was support from most clubs on that situation, but the FAI and the IFA were less enthusiastic about it on that occasion. So Niall Quinn leading the charge in this All-Ireland League. I think everybody sees the positives behind this. Whether or not you're going to get everybody rowing in behind it is an entirely different question.
Yeah, and obviously they have separate organising FAs within UEFA, so presumably UEFA and FIFA have to get on board because, according to them, it will be different FAs having teams. Obviously, it works for the Welsh FA and in England, but it can't work for Scotland for whatever reason. Hazard can go. Blues will sell star to Real to balance books. Chelsea are prepared to sell Eden Hazard to Real Madrid this summer despite the threat of a transfer ban, because to let him leave for free next year would have repercussions for their financial fair play figures. So, maybe financial fair play is somewhere buried in the thinking of these teams at the minute. Houben Nestlé winner. Toner is ruled out of Leinster's Pro 14 decider. So the good news is that coming through so far, and it just seems a bit early about this, that Devon Toner is 4 to 6 weeks, is what they're saying, and is not a doubt now for the World Cup in September. So you would hope that the initial prognosis is correct and that this isn't something more serious, because it definitely looked really bad when he was coming off. So that's great news if it's true.
The Mirror this morning goes with Ole Gunnar Solskjaer saying, "Fat's your lot." He doesn't actually say that, but that's the headline. Solskjaer warning, "We'll ship anyone out who comes back from break too heavy." Pep Guardiola then saying, legend Vince will come back to be boss one day. And Luca gets called from Big Mick. So this is Tottenham target Luca Connell, the surprise inclusion in the Republic of Ireland squad for their Crunch Euro 2020 qualifiers against Denmark and Gibraltar.
Oh, so it's for those games that he's coming in. So we'll cap him for 2 minutes against Gibraltar, and he'll never have to think about it again. So all that, it would have been the wrong thing to do to cap Declan Rice / Jack Grealish in a competitive game, because you'd be bullying a 17-year-old now. Get him in, cap him. Isn't that it?
Yeah, you can't say giving somebody a national cap is a form of bullying. It's a fantastic gift.
Archer call-up means heartbreak for Wiley, or is it Willie? I don't know. 2 L's. It sounds like Willie. Sussex Seamer to cap amazing rise by being named in England's 15-man World Cup squad. The Daily Telegraph Sport, this is welcome to Manchester. City celebrate treble with open-top bus parade. Yep, there you go. That's the Telegraph. That's our lead story. And then no risk, Brighton chairman insists Potter appointment is not a gamble. He should know, he's a professional poker player. Do you see what they did there?
The Irish Times leads with Rennie makes light of Cullen's Rangers remark. This is a story that's taken on an interesting life over the last couple of days. So if you missed it, Leo Cullen, tongue-in-cheek, obviously, said that all Glasgow players, when referring to Glasgow players, he says they all support Rangers, I've been told. Obviously, the game taking place in Glasgow this weekend. Jim Craig, of course, the Lisbon Lion, has come out to say, if I ever meet Mr. Cullen, I'll have a private word with him. He got his publicity over his words, and maybe that's what he was wanting. So Leo Cullen looking to make headlines, which is probably the most un-Leo Cullen thing you could possibly say. Asked if he was saddened by this remark, Dave Rennie said, he's a good man, Leo. I like him. As you know, I don't read a lot of press, so Jack filled me in on what has been talked about. But ultimately, our thinking is that we've got lots of players who support different football sides based on where they're from. We have a heap of football fans who come and watch and play because they enjoy the entertainment, and that's what we're looking for. Obviously, we represent Glasgow, and we hope that regardless of what support you're involved in, you'll want to be there for what should be a fantastic occasion.
Yeah.
This really has become a bigger story than it probably should be.
Well, it's like, so I assume this is exactly, if this game was in, say, Old Trafford, and there was pre-match press conference, like, oh, you're in Old Trafford. He's like, yeah. I hear they're all City fans, that team that were playing there, you know, to try and get the Man United fans out, right? That was it. That's all it is.
I think you can basically take it as such,
yeah. But because Scotland is such a weird, screwed up society, because it has deeply ingrained centuries of sectarianism, this nothing comment becomes this mad story where people are ringing around ex-Lisbon Lion. Well, his son plays for Glasgow, his daughter married somebody, or his grandson, or he's got some family connection to it. And it's like, well, I see an angle where we can pile in behind the and try and drive a wedge even deeper into the sectarian society that we live in. You're like, well, if that's what you want for your lives, then go for it. But I'm absolutely certain that's not what Leo Cullen wanted. He wanted to try and, try and make the boring pre-match press conference interesting. Well, the media sure learned him. Well, okay, me next, The Guardian. Paceman picked Archer gets nod for World Cup to cap rapid ascent, and I'm representing England, but also British Asians. I know people look up to me. Moeen Ali joins The Guardian, so maybe as a he's going to be writing a column for them. Real struggle. Where next for Bale as Madrid dream turns even more sour? Question mark. For that 500 grand a week, he can taste you a bit of tears, Real Madrid fans.
The back page of the Herald features photographs from Anton O'Toole's funeral, and Gavin faces huge calls is their main story here by Frank Roach. O'Carroll and Costello both pushing for starting roles. So Roach going through some of the big calls for Jim Gavin this weekend regarding whether or not he should start Rory O'Carroll, whether or not he should start Cormac Costello, and whether or not he should start Darren Gavin. For me, you start all three.
Yeah. I think you've got to get Costello into the team early and often this year and give him the chance to be... Because Connolly's not back, right? So you figured that if it was going to happen, did it have to happen by now?
Yes.
Before
well,
I
said that a couple of weeks ago. Even at the end of the league, once you got 2 weeks removed from the league and there was still nothing regarding Connolly, for me it was like that this thing is done. It clearly isn't going to happen because of the likes of the amount of planning he needs to do, whereas O'Carroll was a little bit more different. He was clearly out there playing and something was happening. So I don't know, I'd agree though. I think you get Cormac Costello in there, you get him the starting minutes, Rory O'Carroll the very same, and I know I've been banging on about him during the league, but Darren Gavin, you start him in the Leinster Championship because he has the potential to be a starter alongside Brian Fenton, in my opinion.
So he's a midfielder?
Yeah.
A point scoring midfielder?
Yeah, well, certainly looking at him during the league, what was the game against Roscommon, I think, was televised live. That sort of charging run right through the centre. Is he too like Brian Fenton, perhaps? I don't know. I'd need to watch a bit more of him in a Dublin jersey to see exactly how Jim Gavin is using him.
Be happy enough with two Brian Fentons.
Just about to say, if you're too like Brian Fenton, it's not exactly a bad thing.
No.
I've got a feeling that come the end of the summer, he might just be his partner, but Michael Darragh Macaulay has proved time and time again that he's still got life in those legs.
The Irish Examiner this morning, Mike Quirk, the games are about players, not whichever pundit is shouting loudest. And Assassin's Creed, Derek McGrath, the genius of hurling's deadly marksman. They're also talking about minor miracles show hurling needs a heavier sliotar. Munster Exodus, Howlett heads for home to free up another provincial vacancy. A shame shadow has been cast on good work of the FAI. This is Noel Mooney speaking to FAI TV yesterday, and Teenage Kicks Bargery gets City back to winning ways.
My last newspaper is the Racing Post. The front page is, can anyone stop Stradivarius?
Yeah.
Yes. Price-wise on the Ascot Gold Cup. And the back page then, major player Koepka 7-1 to make US Open history as he keeps hold of USPGA crown. Brooks Koepka is going to be favoured for every major for the next 6 or 7 majors.
Yeah, probably. Unless he has a blow up and has an injury or something again, in which case probably not. But we will come back. Vin will come back as boss. So, I mean, pretty much exactly what we said yesterday when he was going out the door, you know, bowing and saying, "Oh, thank you, you're so amazing, you rich people who might give me a job at some point in the future." And then fit or bust. Ole will shut the door to any out-of-shape players, which is the same as "You're the one for me, fatty," or whatever the headline was. And then Regan slams Martin Axing. So Dahi Regan last night slammed the Offaly County Board for axing his double Ireland winning colleague Kevin Martin as county hurling boss. Martin has been replaced by Joachim Kelly, Offaly's 4th interim manager in the past 10 years, after another mid-season change of boss by the serial sackers. The Offaly County Board do like a bit of mid-season drama in hurling and football. They just like it. Yeah, you're gone.
I think the football situation was kind of forced upon them last year, to be fair. They'll say the same thing has happened this year given their poor run of results. And like it's tough being Offaly at the moment. It's tough. It's certainly not boring being an Offaly GAA fan,
no.
But it's tough.
Yeah,
and it's
how much of it do they bring on themselves? How much of it do they bring on themselves?
The
sympathy for the county board, 0 on this side of the table. That's what I'm saying.
Remember that win against Dublin in the league last year in Croke Park? Was there ever a falter dawn?
Top 5 false dawns in Irish sports history.
That was emotional stuff for Offaly that night, and clearly it wasn't to be. Like, they might be back, but it's very hard to know exactly how they managed to bridge that gap where they're actually maintaining some level of competitiveness in the Leinster Championship. Because Carlow are clearly better than them at the moment, and what we've seen in the last couple of weeks, they're not even near the top 2 in the Joe McDonagh Cup. They will get back to that level, you'd imagine, in the next couple of years, but actually being competitive in Leinster again seems some bit off. There's a couple of stories we wanted to get onto. I know you've got Mike Quirk's column in front of you there, like also in the same newspaper this morning. You've got John Fogarty basically saying hurling needs a heavier slitter. It kind of ties in with Kieran Cunningham as well in the Star this morning. His basic point is that football is never as bad as it's made out, and perhaps hurling is never quite as amazing as it's been made out. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I can't quite say. He definitely said that football is never quite as bad as it's made out, and this idea that perhaps the ease with which modern hurling players are able to score points is actually bringing the game back a little bit. That obviously we get great excitement, and for me the excitement actually comes from tight affairs. It comes from a brilliant championship structure. It comes from the fact that you've got really good local rivalries and you've got really good local teams going toe to toe. The sport is outstanding as well, don't get me wrong, but could the sport be even better with, say, a heavier slitter? And John Fogarty is talking about the Cork Miners the last day, where a fella scores a free from over 80 metres out, which really, like, you look at Patrick Horgan, he scored from similar, maybe even 90 yards on Sunday as well. Like, fouling just outside the halfway line in the opposition half at this point just isn't a runner anymore in hurling. You put yourself in danger of actually conceding, which is a little bit ridiculous.
Which also makes the sport way better, which means that, like, players aren't tacking you down, which means that it's free flowing, the skill levels, the best players are actually given the freedom to express themselves, while at the same time having somebody dunce you with the hurl in the head and the face and being, you know, quite manly as a sport. Go on, tell me how this is a bad thing.
Well, I think it could be...
Tell me how being punished for fouling is a bad thing?
Well, it's not being punished for fouling, it's being rewarded for having a shot from within your own half.
It's like
being able to actually being able to reach that. Like, I just don't see how the idea of a heavier... I would actually like to see how it would impact the game of hurling if there was a heavier slitter. What would actually be...
a heavier slitter, like, for... I'd like to know how much... I don't know the facts about how different the weight is now from what it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. But the quality of the games that we saw between Kilkenny and Tipperary when they had their 2 dynasties clashing, and ultimately it turned out there was really only 1 dynasty. When Kilkenny won their 4 in a row, when they lost the 5 in a row, they're some of the best sports events you're ever going to see. And
there was lots of goals in those games.
And I presume the equipment hasn't changed significantly since then. Last year's, there were a bunch of really top-end games. The final wasn't quite as good a game. It was dramatic, but the skill levels were a bit down because I don't think Galway actually played at their very best. Obviously they had to make that comeback in the last 10 minutes. I think the game is as good as it's ever been, and the notion that somehow it has fallen behind football because we've had 3 good football matches is dumb.
The point about hurling being the idea that it's falling behind football, I don't think that's necessarily the case, especially at inter-county level. It's clearly not, and I don't think anybody's suggesting that we've got a better product at inter-county level for hurling than football. It's clearly better in hurling when you can actually have these sort of contests. But I think the point here is that the idea of actually getting yourself into more dangerous positions in terms of actually being able to put the ball in the back of the net is lessening. That's the point here, that ultimately if you have the option between working your way into a better position to score a goal, which is a more exciting outcome than a point, that isn't being pursued as often as it used to be. The goal scorers and the prolific goal scorers isn't a thing. It used to be when...
It's far less of a thing, yeah. And so...
the prolific goal scorers, I would much rather see more goals in hurling. The fact that you're able to point the ball from 80 yards kind of removes that possibility a little bit. We are kind of nitpicking here to a certain extent when it comes to actually...
Do you not think football's a better game than hurling, though? Is that not the central thesis of your argument here? That's why you're looking for these nits in the first place.
The essential thesis of my argument is that hurling could be an even better sport than it already is. They've got a brilliant structure, and at inter-county level, it is a far better product. For me, would I rather watch an amazing football game or an amazing hurling game? Probably an amazing football game. Because of where I come from, because of what I've grown up watching, because... for numerous reasons like that, I admit my bias. But ultimately, if you pick out any of the great hurling games over the last couple of years, or you ask me to pick between, say, Dublin and Mayo in the All-Ireland final 2 years ago, Dublin against Kerry in 2013, whatever it may be, I would pick those football games hands down. What would you choose?
I'd pick the hurling game.
What was your favourite hurling game over the last 5 years?
Over the last 5 years... I'll have to come back to you on a specific one.
Is that because everything is so amazing? That every single week it's like...
No, it's not. I think it depends. The games you're at, I find, are the ones that live longest. So to order them, we had a few disappointing All-Ireland finals and we had a few amazing All-Ireland finals. The All-Ireland final where Tip scalped Kilkenny, when the Bowls final, that was too easy for them. Where Waterford didn't perform, that wasn't great. But all the other ones have been pretty sensational. Anyway, if I had to pick, I could order those in time. But I still think that I don't know. I prefer hurling as a sport. That's it. It's a personal thing, and it doesn't actually.
It doesn't matter at all. The essential point of this is that. Ultimately, would you rather, we all love hurling. Is there a point here that you could actually make this thing even better again if you had more goals scored? For me, it peaked around 2010.
Well, so what is the weight difference in Slither from now to 2010?
I don't think there is one. Is there more of a realisation now that actually you can hack the system a little bit more, for lack of a better phrase, by actually taking your scores from further out, not working the ball in?
Yeah, we'll come back to this a little bit later on because it's a debate that has been fired generally around social media over the last couple of days. But we want to move on because I'm delighted to say the former Treasurer and General Secretary of the FAI, Brendan Menton, is with us this morning. Brendan, good morning to you.
Good morning.
We just wanted to get your take on the latest developments with regards to the FAI. There's been fairly significant movement in the last week or so.
Yeah.
The council meeting was held. Some stuff came out at that, essentially that UEFA would be stepping in to bankroll the FAI and that there was no risk of the FAI becoming insolvent, and subsequently Noel Mooney has been put in. I think it's fair to link these things. If UEFA are handing money to the FAI, they want to make sure that one of their guys is there to make sure that it's being administered properly. What's your take on that whole situation?
Well, I think that's a very good summary of the situation. Yes, it's obvious that UEFA are the cash flow for the association in the short term, but I would presume that's an advance on future income from UEFA television deals rather than an extra grant. So to me it says that the FAI are in significant financial crisis. And I think with Noel Mooney's appointment, we have a situation where a UEFA employee is the general manager of football in Ireland. So, it seems to me that the FAI board, well, I think they lost control a long time ago, but certainly they're not in control of the situation now. It's UEFA who are calling the shots. And, I think the financial crisis is very severe. What's the situation of the association's bankers? I think it's Bank of Ireland to hold the debt on the Aviva Stadium. And what's their attitude going to be? Are they going to allow the debt to be rescheduled? What conditions are they going to impose? And my biggest fear is that if you've got a situation where an organisation is in financial crisis, where are the expenditure hits going to happen? And to me, that seems to be on staff again and on development programmes. As a treasurer, although 20 years ago, these are the areas that are going to take the brunt of any adjustment.
Were there always cash flow issues in an organisation the size of the FAI? Would that have been fairly common during your period? No. We ran it on a break even. For the 4-year period I was there, 96 to 2000, I think we managed to break even. But the biggest difference there was that we didn't have any debt. As honorary treasurer, I was vehemently opposed to the Aircon Park project, aided by John Byrne and Kevin Fahey at the time. And because, as honorary treasurer, I saw that if we had a huge debt, I think it was up to, again, 70 million at the time, that all our resources would need to go to pay the debt and therefore not be available to develop football in the country. And I think we've lost at least one generation of development for our players, and in the current situation, I think we're going to lose another. Okay. Recently, to development. Recently, you've written about the what you would see would be a beneficial move for closer links between FIFA and the FAI. How do you feel about UEFA coming in? Is this actually a good thing that UEFA will have somebody at the coalface reporting back to them and saying, look, this is how the structure is at the moment, this is what I think we should be doing to change it? Or
I think that the board of the FAI were left with no other choice, because they had lost control of the situation. They didn't have the capability of resolving those issues. My original idea was that you put in what's FIFA called a normalisation committee for a period of 15 months until the AGM in July 2020. And that would be help for UEFA, help from FIFA, but also some Irish people acting as a board, but with the expertise to direct the association to resolve these problems for the association. My fear is that the current government's review, it's too rushed. How are they going to do? They're going to produce a draft report, I think, on the 14th of June, finalise the report on the 20th of April, but yet all the other investigations are not going to be completed by that stage. The Grant Thornton, the Mazars, the COSI, the ODCE, the Companies Registration Office, none of these reports are going to be completed and considered. So what's going to happen when they come? Are we going to have a second reform programme to start when the implications of all those reports are considered?
So your concern is that the process now will move too fast before all the facts come to light?
Yeah, and I think the process now is designed to preserve the status quo, to preserve the position of the current 8 directors. Let me call them the Abbotsgate 8, right? I think they have said they're going to resign. Maybe they will, but they will stand for re-election. And I don't think there's going to be significant change coming out, because what happens with the Governance Review project? The report, maybe a great report by the Governance Review Committee with radical reforms, but it goes to the board of the FAI, it goes to the council of the FAI, goes to the AGM of the FAI. But to me, this doesn't seem to be an implementation plan to go with this governance review. So how are you going to achieve changes if the people who brought the Football Association of Ireland into this debacle are going to be the very same people who are going to reform it for the future? That lacks credibility in my view.
When you say there's no implementation plan, what would an implementation plan look like?
Well, I think the first thing you need to do is radically change the decision-making structures within the Football Association of Ireland. You have to make that an absolute must. And if we look at it, there's 400,000 people involved in the game in Ireland, yet it narrows down to about 175 people attending the general meeting. What's that? Less than 0.5%. Then it narrows down to 59 people in council and remaining 8 people on the board. So you have a very narrow funnel of control. And most of the people involved in that are historical affiliates, right? And they're not it doesn't reflect the activity in the game. The biggest part of the game in this country is underage football. It has something like 4 delegates to this council. Women's football, the fastest growing, has 2. Coaches are not represented. Yet some of the historical, like the Leinster Football Association, has something like 10. One-sixth of the people on council coming from one organisation. That really doesn't do it very much anymore. So you have to start by a radical change in the fundamental structure of the association. The other thing you have to change is the culture of the association. And by that I mean you have to change the attitudes, and unfortunately you have to change the people. Noel Mooney talked about building trust. You're not going to build trust with the grassroots of Irish football if the same people stay in charge.
It's a pretty difficult situation, Brendan, when the organisation is so big and so unwieldy and has so many diffuse responsibilities. You mentioned there, you know, women's football, coaching, underage football.
Yeah.
I don't know, is there a template for a global structure that runs smoothly, that gives every branch of football a say in the stuff that affects them and a general say in the direction that the whole sport goes in the country, while at the same time having a separate executive branch which is free to go off and make the day-to-day decisions that you need to do to run a business?
Okay, there's two issues here. Yeah, I've actually made a submission to Governance Review Group. I submitted it yesterday, and one of the key things, there's two key things I'm proposing, is that we greatly expand the entitlement to go to general meetings, right? And I'm recommending that the clubs should be the base of this, that every club with 5 or more teams in competing football should be entitled to have an attendee, a delegate at the general meeting. And I think that would change things significantly. The other thing I want to change is the role of the FAI Council. It has been compliant, quiet, acquiescent in recent years. Its role should be to challenge the board, supervise the board. So its composition needs to be radically changed. It needs to be extended to bring in the new groups, the coaches, the fans, the professional players, increase the underage, increase the women, all of these things, reduce some of the historical groupings. But you give it more power. Maybe you put in an independent chairman who can then has to challenge the president. Because to me, the problem in recent years has been that the association has been run by a small cabal of people. The chief executive, the honorary secretary, the honorary treasurer, the president. So maybe 4 people control this vast organisation. They were never challenged at the board. They were never challenged at the council. They were never challenged at the AGM.
Well, we don't know that they were never
challenged by the senior staff.
Sure, we don't. Well, we don't know that they were never challenged by the senior staff, or just for the sake of fairness, they're not here, and okay, we don't know that some of the board members may have challenged them, but that, you know,
there's no evidence of that,
and there's no evidence on the other side of it either. So I get the point. I get the point you're making, Brendan.
Okay,
and it's a fair point. But I do wonder though, like sometimes organisations need a few people to make quick decisions. If the stadium debt needs refinanced, or if we qualify for a tournament, does everything then have to go from board to be rubber-stamped by council?
The point you made, and agree that we need an effective board, an executive committee or board of management, or whatever term you call it. But it has to be, you know, I think Des Casey made this point in the Irish Times last week, where he said, look, the way the board is appointed in the FAI is actually upside down. The board should be elected by the general members, right? And then, you know, the honorary treasurer should have an accountancy qualification. The honorary secretary should have legal qualification. It's the board, the recent board in the FAI has actually been selected by people who were appointed to chairman of the underage committee, chairman of the domestic committee, chairman of the National League. There was no elections, right? So what we need is to professionalise the board. And I think there's 2 strands in that. One is football is very important. The board is not only about business, it's also about football. So we need very strong football people there, but we also need very strong business people there. And that's why one of the proposals I'm making is that we have 5 independent directors who can be co-opted to the board and can provide the expertise. And I think so maybe a 15-man board, but to ensure that the expertise is there in all the areas. That's what needs to happen. But also this board has to report to the FAI Council on every 2 months.
If you had any advice, if you had an opportunity to sit down with Noel Mooney, what would you be telling him?
I don't know Noel Mooney. Because I've lived outside the country for 15 years until late last year. So I don't know Noel. The next 6 months is going to be crisis management, right? it's very difficult to impose a new strategy at the same time you're dealing with a crisis, and that's another reason why I'm sceptical of the effectiveness of the governance review reform. I think Noel's job is looking after UEFA's interests.
Here's a question for you.
Somebody needs to come up with an overall plan for the association, an overall restructuring of the association, changing its political structures, changing its cultures, changing its policies and procedures. But for me, the key issue is, how are you going to actually achieve these reforms? That seems to be missing at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately it was about the implementation of the Genesis report. If all of those reforms had been implemented at the time, then perhaps we wouldn't be in the scenario we are now.
I'm not so sure. There's a bit of history attached between me and the Genesis report. But what the Genesis report effectively did, it allowed control to be narrowed into like a cabal of four in the end. And that can't be good for a large organisation.
Can I ask you one question? Sorry,
Sure.
You talked about Noel Mooney's job will be to make sure that UEFA's interests are protected. Do UEFA's interests and the FAI's interests broadly align? Like, are we obviously UEFA want to get their money back, but equally they want to make sure that the FAI becomes a functional organisation that will be able to contribute.
Yeah, look, I worked with football associations all over the world, and particularly in Asia and Africa when I was abroad. So I understand, where UEFA would be coming from. But like, how radical are UEFA going to be? My question, even if I've only read reports of what Noel Mooney's video or FAI video last night said, and it seems to me that the implication there was that the current board were going to stay in charge, and I have a significant problem with that. For me, the key issue for UEFA is: are they going to try and protect the status quo, protect the 8 directors of the FAI, or are they going to really push for radical reform that will prevent these kind of crises ever happen again in the association? That's the question.
Yeah, and obviously I think all of Irish football feels like there's a small window of opportunity here for the reform to happen. We actually have a clip from Noel Mooney's video here. Have a listen to this, and we'll get your reaction to it. Have a listen.
In terms of governance reform, again, it was quoted at the weekend, but remarks you made to the 2017 AGM in Kilkenny, how do you marry those with where we are today?
Well, the FAI has many sides to it. I mean, the work they do at coach education, for example, or developing grassroots football, the work of our development officers in towns and cities across Ireland is really, really good. And I get the opportunity to see all the 55 federations in actions in all different ways. And for sure, from when I joined the FAI to when I left, certainly 7.5 years ago, the FAI had grown immeasurably. And it is on the right track. In many ways, the FAI, below the surface, I suppose, in the towns and villages, the grassroots club that I'm involved in would have seen the services from the FAI grow a lot and improve a lot. So in many areas, the FAI as an organisation is very, very good. What's happened in the last couple of months, I suppose, has put a big shadow over all of the work of the FAI. And I think that's unfortunate that people will say because some things happened in the organisation that, as I say, cast a shadow over all the rest of it. It's a shame for, I suppose, all them people in the village, in my own grassroots club, who feel that they're tainted a bit by whatever reviews are ongoing at the moment.
And in terms of what you actually said in 2017, I mean, you would have travelled all over Europe going to AGMs and federation meetings. Yeah,
so part of my role at UEFA is to visit the annual Congress of Football Federations. We'll make a speech on behalf of UEFA, on behalf of our president, and generally we will be complimentary of the federation when we do speak to them. However, as I say, the FAI has many faces. In many areas it does tremendous work across a different array of areas. So the FAI would be held up in some areas as a barometer for other federations. As I say, for community development, for example, if Eastern federations had the same attitude towards it as the FAI, European football would be in a much better place. We have huge countries like Turkey, Russia, Ukraine that would be far behind the FAI in terms of developing the sport at grassroots level. So I think the FAI can, in many areas, be seen as a leading federation in UEFA, that's for sure. And it's just a shame that the things that have happened, I suppose, have cast a shadow on the really good work of the FAI.
Yeah, Brendan Menton, this is there was a controversy when those comments from 2017 were published at the weekend. What do you make of what Noel Mooney said there?
Well, I think Noel is right in stressing that the strength of football in this country is at the grassroots level. It's the staff working on the development, it's the coaches, it's the clubs, it's the leagues. That's the strength. We have to build on that strength. But unfortunately, the leadership has let the grassroots down. And the leadership should be changed.
Are you confident or hopeful that will happen?
No. I think the process is designed to preserve the status quo. I think the people who are making decisions won't be for radical change. They'll want to preserve their positions of privilege, their positions at the top table, their tickets, their travel. And unfortunately, that's the way it is. And that's why we need a radical change in culture of the association.
All right, Brendan Menton, we'll leave it there. Thanks very much for very good of your time this morning. Thank you. Brendan Menton there, the former General Secretary of the FAI. Not a lot of hope knocking about from somebody who knows the ins and outs of the politics and who has experienced firsthand exactly the machinations that go on in the FAI. Now, granted, that was back in Merrion Square. Is life different in Abbottstown now? I don't know, but that was interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of a reality check, considering we've got plenty of them over the past couple of months. I'd be interested in who his ideal CEO was, if he was like leading the recruitment process or whatever it may be, or if his vote was the only vote that counted were he back inside the FAI tent. So I don't know, it's obviously a huge few months, and I guess there is a level of truth in what Noel Mooney was saying, is that any good that's been done by the association has been pretty much eradicated by the events over the last couple of months. Yeah,
okay. Let me play you this video. Leinster Scott Fardy here explaining his affinity with Wexford hurling in conversation with Stephen Doyle for Off the Ball.
Well, if Amy Mason, your Dublin neighbours, yesterday were wearing the Wexford top to the hurling match. The tie made you wear it?
No, Ty gave it to me a long time ago, about a year ago. So I said that we'd get to a game, we're going to go down in Wexford, but obviously the game was nice and close, so we got out there. It was a great atmosphere, and it's I have appreciation of the skill level that those guys have, and it was great to watch the game. As I say, not the best finish for Wexford, but onwards and upwards from them.
Was it the first live match you'd seen, was it?
No, I was saying I went to Croke Park once last year for the semi-final, so I watched Clare versus Galway. That ended a draw as well, so I've gone to 2 games and seen 2 draws, which has been great. So I'm yet to see a winner at any of the games, but hopefully next time I go along, I'll get to see one.
Yeah, you can get the rest of that pre-match build up to the Pro 14 final over at offtheball.com, or you can get rugby on youtube.com/offtheball. Now we want to go on to talk about some of the big football stories that are brewing at the moment, particularly the Gareth Bale saga, what it means for the future of Real Madrid and Zinedine Zidane, and also talk a little bit about Pep and maybe a bit of Xavi as well. Graham Hunter, good morning to you. How you doing?
Hi fellas, good.
Let's start with Gareth Bale. Obviously, the power of a contract is such that you can't just sack a player, you can't get out of it unless you want to pay him up. So Gareth Bale is sitting pretty until 2022, I think. Is that right?
22, signed in 16, when it was a deal extension. And when a club puts a guy like that at that age, a guy who'd been, even then, divided opinion, not been controversial, that asks you a question about your house management. If there was no thought in 2016, zero thought about his age, about whether they wanted to get money back, then when they put him on a deal that was to last 6 years, it wasn't a fresh deal, it was an extension, then they weren't thinking very far ahead as far as I'm concerned, Jack.
it doesn't make any sense, really, that now they've decided just to burn him out. Has his form fallen off so precipitously that there is no way he could be a contributor to that team?
No. It's absolutely the case that if you look at bursts of his form this season, the number of goals he contributed, and the way in which, if you stood back and took all the heat and the venom and the misinformation out of this campaign, and you started from scratch and say, okay, we're going to accept that he'll be at our club beyond his best athletic years because we're keeping him. If you accept that the deal for Ger's deal, let's call it the Ger deal on Gareth Bale, would have to be without Zinedine Zidane because there's no feeling between the two of them. Bale doesn't act or integrate or indeed play the way that Zidane views his team. And that's quite legitimate. That's fair enough. That's the history of all competitive sport. Coach wants one thing, player wants another. But if you take Zidane out of the picture and you say, I'm not going to build a team around Bale, but I'm going to build a team in which Bale's attributes and Bale's personality will fit, he is still athletically, competitively, in terms of his ability to go past players, his ability to score, his ability to create. It's very nearly the same Gareth Bale as they bought.
Really? Because there was definitely, the misinformation has clearly worked then, because there was a sense that Gareth Bale at this stage of his career is like the type of signing that Manchester United would make now, where they would vastly overpay for somebody who used to be amazing but who now is a shadow of their former selves. But that's not the case.
They would have to vastly overpay because, you know, as they sit, Real Madrid are not afraid of utter contradiction. That's not me being critical, that's just a matter of fact. They desperately want the wage bill reduced. They desperately want to change the profile, the attitude of the team, and it's legitimate. They should want to do so. But so their utter drive to get Gareth Bale out, which is the third time they've tried it. I mean, let's be clear about this. When Mbappe first went to Paris Saint-Germain, they tried to shift Bale to Manchester United. They gave him permission to speak to Manchester United. He turned Manchester United down. But the contrast is that despite this willingness to indulge in a malevolent media campaign about him, because they still think that might affect him, meaning that they know very little about the man, they still want money for him. They still expect big money from him. So on your scenario, if United were to come in and buy him, it would cost them a lot. But Gareth Bale, if anybody's been watching him closely rather than looking at headlines this season, there's not a lot of difference, Ger, except that, one, he's completely peed off. Two, he's playing in a very weak team. They've been irresponsible throughout most of the season. He's playing in a team whereby they're paper thin. You can push them over, and as soon as their last target's disappeared, they've hauled up the white flag. I mean, it's pretty pathetic to watch. It's not something I think any of them. Well, there are a small handful of exceptions. Bale's the way Bale's perceived, Ger, the way in which it's simple to paint him, particularly in the Madrid media, can be sourced in the fact that he's part of a losing franchise, and therefore very few people, in the way that this ripple in the pond effect, Madrid say, listen to the media, we'll owe you, we'll give you a transfer story, we'll give you an interview if you put the boot into Bale. There's very few in the media step back and say, look at this guy individually. And there's very few who do what you did there, which is assume journalistically the position of a sports director, a football director, and say, okay, just in practical terms, what is the Bale asset, and how do we measure that against the rest of the team? And how do we measure the Bale asset against the continuity of a manager who in his 11 games has looked utterly different from the Zidane in charge last time, in that, one, he's pointed at a puddle of mud, told everybody to avoid it, and then he's walked straight back into it. Because a year ago, he was the one saying, desperate change is needed. I don't see a competitive attitude. There are real problems. It's healthy if I walk away. And he walks back into the same problems with 11 games of the season left. For a guy who I like and admire, Zidane's attitude to what he's done in coming back then instead of at the end of the season is utterly baffling to me, Ger. And Bale is a partial recipient of those problems, because right now everybody's pointing at each other, shouting and snarling. And they've found time to. If elite level football has been transferred to walking football, then I see the reason for renewing Toni Kroos. Otherwise, no chance. This is the guy who spent all season walking in the midfield, going, "Oh, there's an opponent running past me. Oh, that's lovely. Look at aerodynamically how he performs. Unbelievable.
So if that's the case, and presumably the scouts at all the top clubs have established that Gareth Bale is still Gareth Bale, then suddenly the market for him is much hotter than we would have anticipated, maybe.
Not in value for money. No, it's not. You have to look at the ridiculous amount that he's being paid. You have to look at the fact that Real Madrid are an utter contradiction in it. They're not going to give him away. They're not going to give him a freedom card, which they sometimes do to players. So clubs who want Gareth Bale, there's a mountain of problems. One, Gareth Bale looks at the clubs who want him and isn't particularly attracted by them. Life in Madrid is, as far as he's concerned, given that he's idiosyncratic in terms of elite footballers, he loves life in Madrid. He's extremely stubborn, doesn't particularly want to leave. And if clubs come in, like you pointed out there, one, Madrid will be asking a high price. Two, the salary is huge. Three, Gareth Bale regards himself as an absolute elite player. There are very few clubs he would deign to join. And finally, I think he and his agent have a suspicion, and I think they might be right, that they'll outlast Zidane.
Right. So he could still be there through Christmas.
Through Christmas? Are you thinking this? I love your 1914-18 sort of allusion. Do you think Florentino Perez is saying to his staff, "Don't worry, it'll all be over by Christmas"?
Because I'd assumed they were going to double down on Zidane and back him in the transfer market this summer, give him the players that he wants and allow him to try and introduce that.
They will. Of course they will. You're right. But will Zidane? Right. Okay. So my Kroos point was I expressed it in a mean fashion. But Kroos is a shadow of the player he was. If they believe that suddenly the summer holidays and slightly better players around him will transform into a player who runs and works, best of luck to you, because he's still extremely talented. But the idea about watching, I won't use the full expression at breakfast, but a crap show like this, and imagining that it's a retouching job, there's integral rehabilitation of competitive attitudes to be done. There are players in that squad who've been scarred for good and bad, indelibly scarred by having the glut of Champions League trophies. And many of those won't be renewed as competitive beasts until they get put out of their comfort zone into another club. And then finally, there are some of those who remain. Marcelo and Kroos, I imagine, they've sold their own goalkeeper. And Courtois is a brilliant goalkeeper, but it hasn't worked at Real Madrid. I don't mind them reinvesting in him and thinking that they can restart him. But Keylor is by far the better performing goalkeeper. They're going to keep Marcelo. They're going to keep Kroos. There is no feel, Ger, of Zidane being given or being able to author a change so dramatic that things will be right by August, September. They might be. And from my perspective, I enjoy when Real Madrid play well. I enjoy Zidane as a football character. I think he's elegant. I think he's funny. I think he's inspirational. And I enjoyed his coaching time. He may not yet be the most brilliant strategist the football world has ever seen, but he's a presence of worth and elegance in Spanish and world football. But right now, the direction in which they're going for their restart really makes me concerned. Really does.
It seems to me that Zidane's, let's imagine his dream summer is get Paul Pogba in, get Luka Jovic in, get Eden Hazard in, and let's just pretend that they are the three targets that will make Zidane a happy man this summer. But if, for example, you can't get one or perhaps you can't get two of them in without Gareth Bale leaving the club, and Gareth Bale is happy enough to play golf for €17 million a year, then I do wonder, does he have the capability in his personality to hold a grudge against that player? What sort of Zinedine Zidane would we then see?
I think that Zidane is a complex mix of his own man, in that he said last week, and he didn't throw this out, he was asked it. But he said, if there's any interference with my team selection, then I'll leave. Now, even though he was asked about, and that was based around the fact that he wants to promote his son, Luca, to be number 2 goalkeeper, when there are a lot of doubts that Luca still is at a stage, age-wise, ability and experience, that he should be number 3 goalkeeper. I use that on as an example. When a coach like Zidane, who's just come back with the playing and managerial CV that he's got at Real Madrid, is already using the phrase, "I'd walk," it's a Freudian slip. So I worry about his attitude to the job in front of him. However, in terms of directly your question, I think he remains in many aspects a company guy, a Florentino Perez guy. So if Florentino says the way in which we rebuild means that Gareth Bale doesn't get in your playing squad and that we tough it out, it comes to the end of the market, Owen, and there hasn't been a move for Bale that he'll accept, or that the club will accept, but they still want to do what they're doing now to Bale, then the idea that they might leave him out of their playing squad and pay him when he's not even got a ticket to play football is brutal. I hope it doesn't happen. They could. It is feasible that they could do it. I think it would be a degradation of the club, a degradation of Gareth Bale's reputation. I absolutely wish this not to take place. But Real Madrid is the kind of club, and maybe there are other big clubs who would do it. I don't mean Real Madrid alone. They could name their registered players, and let's not say Gareth Bale, but a player that they wanted rid of. They could, in this system, feasibly leave him off their playing staff and have him sitting twiddling his thumbs. And I hope that any footballer in that situation would say, okay, as much as I like it here, I've had my chips and I'm off. So my preference, because I enjoy watching Gareth Bale play, and I think his achievements have been gargantuan, my preference is that he finds a new home and extends his playing career, the exceptional last phase of his playing career, by winning more trophies and sticking 2 fingers up to Real Madrid from another jersey with another badge. But do I honestly right now think that is the way that this is going to be resolved? I quite frankly, I don't.
I want to ask you about Barcelona, Graham, and Xavi, who's obviously retired from football, has spoken about his playing career. He says you can't just get straight into a Ferrari, but he ultimately says that he does want to end up at Barcelona. I do wonder if there are worse things that Barcelona can do as a football structure than bringing Xavi in some respect, be it with the B team, even as an assistant coach in that respect, or anything, because this is just as important a summer for Barcelona as it is for Real Madrid. They are chasing something that is kind of harder to chase, I think, than domestic league. It is the Champions League. It is this intangible thing, and they are looking for something, whether it is that centre back in Matthijs de Ligt or whatever it may be. But the intangible thing that they need, maybe the spirit that Xavi could bring back to the club, could be a vital component as well.
I do agree with you. If this was a laboratory experiment, then I agree with your point. I think it's really well made. In terms of likelihood, first of all, it's been a privilege for me to be around him during his playing career, a privilege to know him. He's become certainly my top 2 or 3 favourite footballers ever. I'm sad that he's retired, but time ticks. Talented man speaks with forked tongue, Owen, and I don't mean you. Xavi saying these nice expressions he's got don't get to the nub of the fact that the deal is set. Victor Font is his friend. Victor Font is the candidate who will stand and expects to win. I think legitimately expects to win in 2021 when Barcelona have presidential elections. Xavi will be his coach. Xavi's perspective is just, a hint different from what you quoted. You quoted him accurately, but in here, in the calculating brain that he's got, the idea is that he finishes coaching badges in May in Las Rosas in Spain. He carries on coaching and learning in some aspects and fulfilling his very lucrative contract in Qatar. He's got 2 very young kids. He gets 2 years further down the line with that, with living, as he called it when I was out there a couple of times interviewing and filming him. He said, I like living outside the bubble. And it's really interesting. When I was last in Porto, which was 4 or 5 weeks before Iker Casillas' shocking heart attack, he used the same expression. I didn't ask him about Xavi. So why are you still here? It's brilliant. I love being outside the bubble. I think we misunderstand or underappreciate the intensity of constant pressure on these guys. And therefore, while Xavi is much more depressurised than Iker, he's been away longer, I think that his attitude is that 2 more valuable years of preparation, of family development, and waiting until it's a clean slate and he takes over with Valverde, or if anybody replaces Valverde, he takes over rather than being on their staff. And if you imagine, I think that although Valverde and Xavi have a different attitude to how Barcelona should be playing, Xavi's respect is patently very, very high for Valverde and what he's achieved. But if he's on the staff, Owen, then the first time that Valverde has a bad result, the media are full of promote Xavi, get rid of Valverde. That's a marriage I don't see working.
Graham, last question for you. The Italian papers this morning are full of the fact that Juve are particularly interested in Maurizio Sarri, and this might all work out for everybody because the English papers think that Chelsea actually want Frank Lampard to be their manager as opposed to Maurizio Sarri, who is their current manager. And well, we all know that Chelsea don't really like paying managers off, as we've learned with Antonio Conte. The manager,
they don't like it, but they do it.
Eventually.
They might not like it.
Eventually.
They paid a lot of money out.
What do you think is going to happen here?
Yeah, Sarri to Juventus is enticing as a comic book story. Whether the personality of the brand of football compared to the squad is right, I'm not sure. If the educated Italian media, and this is all a Di Marzio story, it initiates with Di Marzio, who I'm sure is a very good Italian journalist, but because he got the Pep thing right, every time he writes, everybody says, "Oh, it's biblically true. You can stand on this story." I'd have thought that what we're understanding that Cristiano Ronaldo is a strong word and the coach he wants next because that's Cristiano. Whether Sarri and Cristiano are compatible in football or personal terms, I would wait and see. The idea that a powerhouse like Juventus began to play Sarri-style football and gave him the component parts that he needed, which matched with the way that they gave him component parts at Napoli, and it's differed with the fact that he's grafting on his attitude and his style to a squad which has been grafted towards his needs. If he was at Juventus and he was given that kind of resources, it would be a hugely exciting prospect. And if they could begin to play football the way that Chelsea began, the way that Napoli did at Juventus, it would like a beacon to draw the admiration and the world recognition that Juve crave. Whether Sarri there would work or not, I have my doubts. Whether Frank Lampard is ready to jump into the Chelsea offer, I would warn him to be very careful and check the state of the club before he took that call.
Graham, great stuff. Thanks a million for joining us this morning. Graham Hunter with us there, giving us some thoughts on the managerial merry-go-round. The other news is that one of the English papers, I think it might have been The Guardian or The Telegraph, are reporting that Bielsa looks like he's going to stay for next year at Leeds, which is good news.
I'd be interested to hear what Keith Andrews has to say about that. I'm sure he'll say that he needs better players.
Well, maybe he'll get a chance to get some in over the summer. He'll know all of the good players in that division, and he'll be able to sign players that other teams might not rate very highly because of all the spying/research he's done.
It's a calculated risk on Bielsa's side. Like, he could easily be in the frame for a Premier League job, but if you get promoted with a team, there is a sense of ownership over it. There is, like, for example, with the Brighton job being available, I think he's better off.
It's gone now. They got power.
Like when it was last week. Like, stick with Leeds, get them up, and you'll be in a far better position than, say, you would be with a team that's just finished 17th or 16th.
Phil Egan's up next, but last night Aaron Kernan was on the show talking about the contentious penalty decision which cost Monaghan in their Ulster Championship clash with Cavan.
Cavan were obviously the superior side by some distance in the first half, so the penalty incident didn't seem overly important at that stage. Its significance maybe increased as we got closer to full time and we're looking at the scoreboard. I didn't think it was a penalty. Man didn't have possession of the ball fully. There was a nudge. Conor Lane can absolutely come on and say, look, I saw a push, and on one angle the push looks to have a bit more in it than most of the other angles. But in real time, I thought, no, you can't give a penalty for that.
If I was from Monaghan, you'd be spewing over it, and I'm a neutral, and as soon as I seen it, I just thought he had the whistle blown. I think he thought there was going to be more in it, and he just had the whistle blown. And I'd say if you asked him now, hand on heart, Conor Lane, was it a penalty? In a private conversation, he'd tell you no, not a chance. Was it a penalty as far as I would be concerned? But But while it was happening, just like you said, I was thinking, well, they're getting tanked all over the field here. You know, it doesn't really matter. In fairness to Monaghan, they came back that well in the second half. They did close the gap. Cavan probably panicked whenever they seen the closing line, or not panicked, but they retreated into themselves a bit as the finish line, or they seen the finish line. But definitely it was an extremely harsh penalty. You know, I wouldn't be too happy if it went against Armagh, that's for sure.
Papers this morning reporting that Kieran McGeeney might be in a bit of trouble.
Yeah, it's for shoulder at the end of normal time. So everyone comes onto the pitch, and it's Kevin McKernan who gets a Kieran McGeeney shoulder, and he just kind of a bit of a smile, like there wasn't much in it. It was just a bit like, you know, you're ready for extra time.
There wasn't much in it. Like, it's still...
I wouldn't fancy getting a shoulder off Kieran McGeeney.
It's still a manager who deliberately goes to shoulder a player after...
Is the game over?
Yeah.
So he's allowed to be on the pitch. It's not like it's not like he wandered on. It's not like
it's not Davey and Jason Ford. No, it's. I think. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but just watching it on the Sunday game, he kind of misses somebody first, and then he's like, right, I'll take this next down fella, or like if at least some fella runs past him. So it's hard to tell on television, but definitely a guy runs past him. I'm not sure if McGeeney's actually going for him, but he settles for who's the player that he gets in the end?
This is Kevin McKernan. I have
Kevin McKernan.
Yeah.
It's. Like they didn't show it in full on television. I must go back and watch the BBC deferred coverage to get the full sort of sense of what actually happened at full time, because there was a skirmish, I think it's fair to say. We'll give it skirmish level for that altercation.
They do like throwing the book at him though.
They certainly do.
He gets in trouble more than most managers do.
Yeah, like I wouldn't say it, only that you mentioned it now, it's kind of reminded me, and it's like fair enough kind of, but when I saw it at the start I was like, well, it is what it is. It's no huge deal.
Where are we starting?
We're going to start with the sad news of three-time Formula One world champion Niki Lauda, who has died at the age of 70. He underwent a lung transplant in August, and his family say that he passed away peacefully yesterday. The Austrian won the world title for Ferrari in 1975 and 77, as well as McLaren in 84. And for many, Lauda is going to be remembered for his remarkable recovery and his return to the sport after being badly burnt in a crash in the 1976 German Grand Prix. Suffered third-degree burns to his head and his face. He inhaled toxic gases that damaged his lungs after his vehicle burst into flames. He was even given the last rites in hospital, but then made a miraculous recovery, returned to racing, still bandaged just 40 days later. And at the time, Lauda played down his bravery.
The first week after the accident, I couldn't take any decisions at all because it was too bad. And after, when I was feeling good, I wanted to race again.
Now, it's as you were at the top of the SSE Electricity League Premier Division, just goal difference separating Dundalk and Shamrock Rovers after 18 games. An injury time penalty from Pat Hooban gave Dundalk a 2-1 win at home to Bohemians. Bows went ahead after just 2 minutes. Danny Grant with the goal, but Keith Longside had a player sent off early in the second half. Ryan Graydon was shown a second yellow. Georgie Kelly equalised for the champions in the 66th minute. Then deep into injury time, the Lily Whites were awarded a penalty, and Hooban made no mistake, and he scored a winning penalty against Bohemians just 35 days ago as well. But 3 points for Dundalk. Rovers stayed in touch with a 3-0 win away to Finn Harps. The goals from Ronan Finn, Dylan Watts and Aaron Green. So both teams on 40 points. Just 3 goals better off Dundalk are over Shamrock Rovers, and 3 wins from 4 now for Cork interim manager John Cotter. They beat UCD 1-0. Keane Bargery forced the ball home from 2 yards out on his league debut in the 73rd minute. One game tonight, St Pat's House Derry City at Richmond Park, and that game kicks off at 7:45. Tottenham striker Harry Kane is set to be fit for the Champions League final against Liverpool and Madrid on the 1st of June. Hasn't played since he came off in the first leg of their quarter-final win over Manchester City last month because of ankle ligament injury. But such is the gap to this Champions League final, he's got time to recover. Do you play him?
No. I think that what's going to happen here is that he will insist that he's fully fit, and the weight of expectation to pick him will be so great. I was going to say Pochettino's going to, but I can't see.
Who do you leave out then? It's Son or Mora?
I do not leave anybody out. I stick him on the bench and I say, if we need you, we'll pick you. Wink, wink. And then, oh, geez, we didn't need you. Or, you couldn't have influenced the game anyway. And you have a fight with him. You go, like, you weren't fit. We'd no proof that you were fit. Unless you're absolutely killing it in training. Like, full go. And I'm telling my centre-backs to kick you in training to make sure you're actually going to stick up to the rigour. Because the first thing Liverpool are going to do is tackle him, and make sure that ligament's okay. Rightly so.
leg.
Yeah, rightly so. Oh, it's an accident. You all right, Harry? Oh, jeez, I'm really concerned.
The irony if a Liverpool defender Ramosed Harry Kane. Huh?
I mean, they'd probably get sent off though.
Who would Virgil van Dijk and Joel Matip rather face? Harry Kane or Lucas Moura?
An injured Harry Kane.
Harry Kane.
All day. No?
Initially, I'm trying to think about Harry Kane's perspective here a little bit. Well, not his perspective, because his perspective is that I should be starting. But I do wonder if that's the best course of action, just given what he does best. And it just seems hard to argue against Lucas Moura or Son, given the seasons that they've had and given the recent form, especially of Lucas Moura, that it's very, very hard to pick who to drop. But then you look at everything Harry Kane has done, and in the big game, who do you need? I could see Harry Kane start and score within 5 minutes. But similarly, I could see Harry Kane start and Virgil van Dijk and Joel Matip are looking around him saying, thank God we don't have Lucas Moura around us.
Yeah, it's not going to be a Diego Costa for Atletico where he has a hamstring injury and he comes off after a few minutes. It'd be just a case of Harry Kane not looking sharp in a final.
There's loads of articles online about Harry Kane's previous injuries, but what I'd like to know is how long it took him to get back up to goal scoring form.
He tends to come back and score straight away, and I think the general feeling is adrenaline will get you through those first couple of games, but then as the next couple of games come along, the rustiness is there, but he's only got to do it for one game.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's going to be all the talk anyway when the team sheet arrives, whether Harry Kane is in or out. But you can see your English journal, Harry Kane starts.
Oh, he's got to.
Yeah, so...
Harry Kane, best in the world.
Yeah, well, from one captain to another, Vincent Kompany said an emotional farewell to Manchester City supporters during their open-top bus parade in Manchester last night. The fans lined the streets of Manchester City Centre to celebrate domestic treble for City, and obviously Kompany is leaving after 11 years. He's going to become player manager at Belgian side Anderlecht, where he started his career, and Kompany says the time is right for him to leave.
The moment that ball against Leicester went top bins, I knew I was done. I couldn't do anything better. That goal went in and it felt right. It felt like I've done everything I could. I've given everything I had.
Yeah, quite the celebration in Manchester last night. We actually have some footage here of Pep Guardiola, the manager, giving it thanks. You see it here. Look, there's
He's as good as Roberto Martinez.
Hang on, he's
no Big Sam, no.
No, well, that's for sure.
He's coordinated.
Yeah. He's done this before. This is his thing, I think.
Is it?
It looks very like he's practiced this before.
Because he knew that they were going to be celebrating the league title with an open top bus. I mean,
it's the deleted scene from that Amazon documentary where they actually have dance class and practice for their celebrations.
And they talk about Liverpool's front three. I know you mentioned that Xavi has played his last game of football. His career came to an end with Al Sadd last night. They were beaten by Iranian side Persepolis in their last group match of the AFC Champions League on Monday. Not a bad career for the 39-year-old. Won the World Cup in 2010, European Championship in 2008 and 2012 with Spain as well, and with Barcelona, 2 Champions League titles, 8 La Liga titles. Joachim Kelly has been appointed interim manager of the Offaly Senior Hurlers. He replaces Kevin Martin after a disappointing start at the Joe McDonagh Cup. Offaly have lost to Laois and Westmeath. And finally, the Ireland cricketers are back in action. They take on Afghanistan in a one-day international in Stormont today. Play is due to get underway at 11:15 this morning.
Now, as we mentioned earlier, BMW and Triathlon Ireland are challenging the OTB team to hashtag Try for Pieta this summer and raise funds for Pieta House. It's for a really good cause, and Owen, Joe and Nathan are all going to be contributing £100 each to the pot when we beat them. For more information, check out triathlonireland.com, and you can see the link for more information on the hashtag Try, TRI, for the number 4 Pieta. BMW is the proud partner of Triathlon Ireland and is title sponsor of the BMW Triathlon National Series, 17 of the most exciting triathlon races in Ireland, and it turns out it's much easier than you think to get involved in this. All you have to do is find a fast person to do the swim for you and a fast person to do the run for you, and you, like me, can waddle along on your bike. It's going to be great. Enjoying the sights as I'm cruising past Owen Sheehan.
With a camera. taking pictures.
Nathan should have like when he made like with the €100 pledge yesterday, he should have like made it relevant to all our salaries plus the after dinner speeches we're asked to do, because in that regard Nathan would be able to give
for everybody.
Maybe not for everybody, but we could have a scale of you know, whatever it may be.
So that's it. There's money on the line now.
Yeah, and we're driving around in a sleek BMW 3X3 with our logo and the triathlon.
Was in it last week?
Yeah, it's nice.
Yeah,
very nice car.
Nathan wouldn't let me drive though.
What is that?
No, in fairness, I wouldn't blame him, to be honest. It's quite a tight car park. He's probably thinking, I'll take it from here, Phil. You're not driving that long.
If you see us, beep at us and we'll panic wildly for getting beeped at. Phil, thanks very much. I hope your training's going well.
Training tonight. Yeah, going to try and extend the 3K we did last week, maybe push it out to 5.
I think Nathan was on the beer last night.
Yeah, he's not going to be with me tonight, so I think he kind of maybe held me back a bit last week.
Gotta be kidding me, Nathan. Like, come on, get out there.
We're trying to make sense of Limerick's defeat to Cork over the weekend, and Tommy Walsh looked to the wise words of an unlikely source, Johan Cruyff.
The opposite side of that then is Limerick, Joe, you know, and I was speaking to you yesterday, I don't know, did I say it correctly, but I was after reading about Johan Cruyff during the week, and he was comparing winning to opening a bottle of carbonated water, that when you open it, a little bit of gas comes out, and it's very hard to get the same amount of gas there again. Well, Limerick have been winning since last, I don't know when. They've won the Fenway Classic over in Boston. They've won the All-Ireland. They've won the National Hurling League. I think Cork were the only team to beat them in the league. So these guys, they have probably no... you know, when you lose a match, Nicky would know it well. When you lose a match, or if you play it badly, or if your opponent gets the better of you, no one even needs to say anything to you. It's in your gut. You just feel it when you're going to bed, when you go training the following day. You don't even have to say anything to yourself. You just, with everything that's inside you, you're going to win the next ball. And I think that probably went out of Limerick through no fault of their own. And this could be a lucky thing for Limerick, because it'd be worse if it happened to them in an All-Ireland semi-final when there's no second chance.
Yeah, total hurling. It's the theme of the hurling world. John Duggan, good morning to you. How you doing?
Hello, Ger and Owen.
We're here to talk about Nicky Lauda. How much of Nicky Lauda's career do you remember as a kid?
None, because it was just before there's a moment when you're as a kid, I don't know, for you guys it was the same, when everything just clicked and I knew everything within a day that was going on in sport, and I was obsessive about it. Before that day, I didn't know anything.
Yeah.
Generally, I think it was the World Snooker Final in 1984.
Right.
Was the first one I remember. Jimmy White, Steve Davis. But as a whole, really about 86, 87, I wasn't completely... so Formula One, I was obsessed about in the late 80s, but not as soon as... not as early as when Nicky Lauda won it for the last time in 1984.
So tell us a bit about why Nicky Lauda is so revered.
I think it's bravery and resilience and the ability to bounce back from nearly dying, which was what happened to him in the German Grand Prix in 1976. He'd warned the race organisers that the Nürburgring Ring at the time was too long. It was 14 kilometres or miles, and it would be difficult for emergency services to get to any driver that crashed, and he then did crash. Even looking at the photos this morning, the car is completely in flames. I don't know how he survived. He was dragged out by a few of his fellow drivers. He had third-degree burns. He inhaled toxic fumes, and it damaged his lungs. So that he got to 70 was pretty remarkable. And also that he was going to win the world title that year for Ferrari. He nearly won it. It went to the final race with James Hunt, and Lauda said during the final race, he said, I'm not going to, in very wet conditions in Japan, I'm not going to continue, went into the pits and said he was just panicked. But he came back to win it a year later. He won the world title for Ferrari a year later, and then he won it for McLaren in 1994, the only driver ever to win the world championship for the McLaren and Ferrari teams.
Right.
And then he was a very successful businessman, had two airlines, Lauda Air, which was sold to Austrian Airlines, and then Michael O'Leary bought Lauda Motion there recently enough. He was the non-executive chair of Mercedes. He brought Lewis Hamilton to Mercedes, which was obviously we've seen now in recent years has been a very good signing. But I think it's really he came from wealthy stock, but against the wishes of his family, he decided to get into Formula One. I think he had an insurance policy on his life or something like that in the early 70s, and got into the sport, won a title for Ferrari in 1975, was quite an efficient driver, and like I think we saw with Senna and Prost later on in Formula One, he dovetailed well with the different style and the different personality of James Hunt. They were quite good friends. I haven't seen the movie Rush, which is about the battle of...
It's decent.
I think it's very good, actually.
As sports movies go, it's decent, yeah.
So overnight, we found out that he'd passed. He'd had lung complications in recent months, and he'd kidney dialysis as well. But to nearly pass away, to be given the last rites, and then to come back in a Formula One car and win world championships is pretty...
To compete, I mean, so the film is really about that year. It's the kind of the build-up, him falling in love, the friendship with Hunt, and then is the scene of him driving into the pits in the movie? Remember that?
Yes.
I think of the documentary.
Which scene when he drives into the pits?
Where he decides not to compete in the Japanese Grand Prix.
Yeah,
so that's like,
like when they have the drivers meeting and everybody's kind of a little bit suspicious of Lauda. That scene is done, and then when he just kind of when he drives into the pits and decides, no, I'm done. That is depicted in Rush as far as I recall.
Why are they suspicious of him?
I can't remember.
There is a good documentary about that as well, where you see these team meetings, and like you fast forward to...
Because he was leading the World Championship, wasn't he? The leading driver, or am I getting my dates mixed up?
Lauda was leading the World Championship.
Right, okay, that makes sense.
Race, and Hunt won the race.
When you look forward to, or spool forward to the drivers' meetings at Imola, the footage in Senna of that, I'm right about that?
I remember seeing the Senna movie, and it was just awful seeing Senna watching Roland Ratzenberger. That was just, that to me is almost too painful to watch.
I didn't know that they kind of had those meetings. I didn't realise that the drivers who are all killing each other on the track are actually joined together to talk about what's happening. And it obviously had been going all the way back to the 70s, and I guess from the very start, when the drivers would come together and say, this isn't safe. And no one listened to them.
Or if Senna felt, I think he did earlier in his career, that he'd been treated as the villain. This is what I'm talking about, remembering Grand Prix. Like in 1990, Senna and Prost didn't get on, both for the same team. They were in the best car, and they both go off the track at the first corner of the Japanese Grand Prix. So it was just Murray Walker as well, commentary, bringing it to life. And it's just, this is when you're like getting up as a kid or whatever o'clock in the morning to watch this in Japan. And this is just incredible. And Niki Lauda, kind of an interesting trivia thing, that he won the 1984 championship by half a point, because in Monaco, they didn't finish the full race, so Prost only got half the points for winning it.
Right.
So Lauda ended up winning the championship by half a point. But I was going through some of the photos this morning, and I don't know about it now in private jets and obviously the money they make and everything now, and it is a bit of a circus, like, you know, those Transformers when you were a child, and, you know, it just all opens up and everything is just there. That to me is what the Formula One kind of feels like at the moment. But back in, say, the 70s and everything, you were travelling all around the world, all these places that you get to, and I'd say it was probably a more innocent time to be just travelling around the world and meeting people and winning Grand Prix like the US, like there was Grand Prix in the US back then that Lauda was winning. So a sad day, and, you know, so a lot of legends passing.
This golden age of Formula One that we're talking about, like, does anybody still have that graw for Formula One now? Like, I don't hear people generally in the office who is full of absolute sports fans. There's a couple of people who are interested in watching Formula One, but it doesn't come up in general conversation the way other things would tend to.
Is that because of terrestrial TV? Like, I think everybody has, no matter what generation you come from, everybody has memories of Sunday morning, Grand Prix, whatever it was. And regardless if you're interested in the sport or not, the names became synonymous with the sport, and the names became synonymous with worldwide sport, and were automatically huge figures in your head. Now, granted, that's very localised into what we actually experience here in Ireland and in the UK, but I do wonder if that's actually part of it, really, because ultimately when it comes to a sport that you're not actually playing as a kid, or that you have no kind of first-hand experience of, it is a televisual experience that kind of makes it, right?
I think personalities is a big thing. I think we've seen this a bit in tennis as well in recent years, that you need to be able to identify with the people you're following. I think it's why people could identify with Ayrton Senna, because he wore his heart on his sleeve. He was very emotional. Michael Schumacher, I think, was probably the last person I identified with in Formula One because of his utter brilliance and that he was just breaking all these records in Ferrari and he was just so dominant. I find it hard to warm to Lewis Hamilton. I think Max Verstappen is very interesting because he's young and he's fearless and he's probably what the sport needs. And I think, like, I've seen it with snooker, I've seen it with tennis. I think personality is a huge part of, if you're not talking about team sports, why we connect to. That's why golf, I think, even we're speaking about Brooks Koepka the other day, I think with Formula One, you had Piquet and Senna didn't get on, you had Nigel Mansell was kind of portrayed as dull, but he was, you know, the great British hope. And then he'd also had a few disasters, I think in Australia in 1986. The tyre blew up and then he won the title eventually, and then Damon Hill and Schumacher, like, were going head to head. So I think rivalries and personality, and maybe like it was a bit more raw back then, like it wasn't as technologically advanced as it is now. So I
think that's a huge thing for the real Formula One, the petrol heads, the changes they made a couple of years ago that allowed Mercedes to really take a leap away from the pack. For them, I'd say it's stuck in their craw, but to us it's the personalities.
Well, here's a good question. Who's the best driver in Formula One? Is it Vettel? Is it Hamilton? Who's the best driver? I always felt when Senna was not winning world titles, he still was the best driver. Even Schumacher, like, you even see with Jordan, when Schumacher came onto the scene, he was better than the car he was in. You know, so that's a big thing, I think.
Yeah, I think it's impossible to know, right? And that's the problem. If you could stick them all in go-karts, it would be really interesting for a weekend to watch that, and then obviously you want them to get back in their Formula One cars and everybody knowing, oh, well, it turns out you are the best driver.
Have you guys been to a Grand Prix?
Yeah, I was at the Barcelona Grand Prix once.
What's it? Does it?
Who's where are they?
Can you smell? Can you smell the rubber? Can you smell the petrol?
You can't hear a word. You're like literally shouting at the top of your voice at everybody going.
But can you?
Yeah, it's it's huge as well. So we were kind of in. Looking down, like I'd say if you went and sat in the grandstand and could see the finish line and see the checkered flag, that might be a slightly different experience. But
you were in the cheap seats.
It's a TV experience.
It's like golf.
Exactly. Definitely a TV experience. So
I've always wanted to go to the Monaco Grand Prix and be on the yacht looking at where they come out of that tunnel.
We'll get you a press pass there, John. That's very
There is
doable.
a bucket list that I did put on Twitter because I've been lucky enough to go to a lot of good things, but that is one of the things. But it can't be just, I don't know, Silverstone or something, or Spa or whatever, or the Nürburgring. It has to be the Monaco Grand Prix, but in the yacht overlooking when they come out of that tunnel.
Can anybody sort that out this morning?
No, Tottenham first.
John, good stuff. Thanks very much for that. Podge Collins is on his way over to us. First of all, here's Seán Crosson. He was in to chat about his book, Gaelic Games on Film, talking about Hollywood's relationship with Ireland's native games.
Okay, so Seán Crosson has written a great new book. It's called Gaelic Games on Film. It's out right now and it comes highly recommended. I've been reading it for the last couple of days. Seán, you're very welcome to studio.
Thanks, Seán. Great to be here.
And the one thing that really struck me when reading this was just the sheer volume of archive and film and documentary that you've gone through over the past couple of years, I assume.
Yes. Well, it's been 13 years.
Wow,
journey. The research just began back in 2006. When a friend of mine, a colleague in NUI Galway, David Doyle, asked me, he was hosting a Sports History Ireland conference, and he asked me, are there any films with Gaelic Games? And at that point I didn't really have great expectations, but it began as a curiosity that then was an extraordinary kind of discovery of the record that survives, going right back to 1914, the earliest footage we have, and then the extraordinary work that the National Film Institute did from the 40s on, and then Gail Lynn and others subsequently, to preserve really the moving image history of extraordinary players of Christy Ring, for example, but from my own county Cavan, like John Joe Riley, and for many supporters, even supporters of Mayo, of counties perhaps that haven't had a lot of success in recent years, but would have to look back to those years to find, their heroes, and they're there on film. We can find the records of those players still.
You mentioned 1914, the earliest footage. When you say the earliest footage, you mean the earliest footage of a match?
Yes, it's the earliest surviving footage. So there's records that Gaelic Games were being filmed from very early. The earliest record I've got of a recording was a game from 1901, a local game in Dublin between two club teams that was screened as part of a grand Gaelic night in the Rotunda on Parnell Street back in December 1901. And it was part of us was an international fascination with sport, coming together with sport and film. And it made sense in this very new art form, very new popular cultural form of film, could look to sport that already had huge following, and also had all the elements of drama, of excitement, and unsurprisingly, when film arrived in Ireland, Gaelic Games very quickly became an important part of the repertoire of those that were making films and distributing films. And throughout the early 20th century, you find it's in, and I include some references in the book as well, even though, unfortunately, most of the very earliest films haven't survived, there's plenty of coverage in the media and the press from the period where you can see the kind of fascination with which these films were received at the time by supporters, by the general public across Ireland. And the earliest one that has survived, you mentioned, is 1914, which is the All-Ireland football final replay between Wexford and Kerry. And we have a short, about 2-minute clip from that, which in itself is extraordinary because it gives you a sense of the evolution of the sport of Gaelic football, which was quite different at that period to what it is now. For example, at that time, the ball was thrown in, soccer style, from the sideline, and there's a shot of that in the film. The game was much more played on the ground, and you might find more similarities with soccer. So it was an evolving sport. The solo run only really came into Gaelic football in the early 1920s. So in these surviving, and then when you go into the newsreels in the 20s and 30s, of which we have fortunately a considerable footage there, you can see how the sport is, both Gaelic football and hurling, are evolving, and the skills are evolving, and the kind of cultural context is evolving as well.
So these are full matches, and people are going to the cinemas around these times to actually watch full matches. And would they generally know the results in these matches going to them? They just kind of want to see it?
Yeah. Well, the films didn't record the entire game. Well, film in that period was often quite short anyway. I mean, they were usually maximum what we call one reelers, which is about 10 minutes in length. So that became the kind of the norm around sports. Would be in National Film Institute films, for example, their highlights footage from the 40s on are all 10-minute episodes. But people would have got the result through the press, and they would have gone along, but that wouldn't have changed. There would have still been great excitement to see, you could imagine, to see their heroes up on the big screen, and to kind of participate in that kind of the extraordinary moments that counties enjoyed in that period in terms of All-Ireland glory.
Yeah, for sure. Like, that's when we get into kind of the non-fiction element, for lack of a better phrase, at the very start of Gaelic Games in film. But it gets very, very interesting when you look at it in fictionalised film. And I want to play a bit of Knock na Gao here, the film based off the book. Athletes and Knock na Gao boys in a hurling match, as you can see on screen. We're going to have a look at this while we can talk over it. And basically, like, this is the very first time that we see GAA in a fictionalised film. Is that correct to say?
It is, and not only that, it's the earliest footage we have of hurling in any film, whether fiction or non-fiction.
Right.
And what's extraordinary about this clip as well is this film was made in early 1918, released in 1918, based on the most popular book in Ireland in the 19th century. Basically, there was not a household in Ireland that didn't have a copy of Knock na Gao, Charles Kickham's book, set in Tipperary. And it's an attempt to capture hurling in the very early 20th century as it was played back, 50, 60 years earlier. So it's even going back again in terms of capturing the way in which the game was played, the shape of the hurley stick, the clothing and so on. And looking at it now, it's an extraordinarily important record for that period for us today to get a sense of hurling at the time, and it's the approach to the game.
It really does. And like, what does Knock na Gao tell us, despite the fact that it's a piece of fiction about the connection between hurling and social class, like about the people who played hurling at the time?
Well, that's in the book. Is fascinating in that respect, in that it captures what was a very hierarchical structure in Irish society, and even the use of the term sport when we look at the book, and some of this comes through in the film as well, is only applied to, say, blood sports and to the upper middle and upper classes. And it's games, it's basically the labourers, farm labourers that are engaged in sport and in hurling, and it's the sport of the working classes, I guess you could describe it in the context of the book. And in that respect, it's a really important kind of window into the society at that moment in the 19th century, and the way in which sport played a vital role in terms of the expression and the definition, if you like, of the different classes in Irish society.
Yeah, and ultimately this is a time when what became the GAA, what our understanding of the GAA now is a pride of place representing one's place, and ultimately Knocknagow is a story based on the idea that people are going out representing their land or whatever it may be in a game of hurling, which is quite a curious foreshadowing of what the GAA will become.
Yeah, and it's in the book. You see it when the Matt the Thresher, when he goes out to play, to lead the hurlers, he goes, I'll do this for the sake of Knocknagow. So it's very much capturing the spirit that still is a key component of what makes the GAA what it is, that connection with your local community, your local club. And it extraordinary prescient in that respect.
For sure, and when we see how hurling and when we see how Gaelic Games are depicted, especially from foreign studios, it's very, very telling, particularly in the early part of the 20th century. And I do want to get into a couple of Hollywood situations here. We might actually start with this MGM hurling film, and I think this pretty much does all the talking for us.
Here, my masters, are stalwart players on a hurling team. In case you haven't heard, hurling is an old Irish game, a sort of athletic manslaughter. The idea is to sock a ball with this pretty club, or bat, or shillelagh. During a game, however, a stalwart player is sometimes socked on his stalwart cranium with this pretty club, or bat, or shillelagh. Like in golf, the grip is important, or is it? The ball looks something like an indoor baseball, probably due to the fact that it is an indoor baseball. But there's plenty of technique to this good old Irish game, my friends. Even a simple ground shot calls for timing, coordination, and follow through. To bat a grounded ball over the heads of your opponents involves a bit of dexterity. Lifted thus, you now smite it with all your smite. Pun intended. A hurling player must stroke effectively both from the port and the starboard sides. In this shot, the ball is hit on the bounce, so. Then, too, you may help your teammates drive toward the goal by hitting it in flight, if you can. Played for hundreds of years, it's a fast he-man's game of skill and endurance, and no fooling. Watch your head, mister. Here comes a club. How nice. This gent is going to try to goal it from a very difficult side angle. I dare you to make it, fella. The opposing players must be back 21 feet and will try to prevent the ball from going over. Boy, what a drive, and look, it's going over. That's 1 point for the Greys. You can't lift the ball by hand to batter with the hurley, so you use a foot. Kinda cute, what? And now, swing, baby, swing. Here it comes, customers. And so, after a few days, when the whites regain consciousness, they'll be overjoyed to hear that they won the game. Every gladiator sleeps. Yes, every gladiator sleeps.
So that's the work of MGM back in the day. Athletic manslaughter, they describe hurling as, which I presume is indicative of the view of Irish people and their games at the time.
Yeah, it's appalling in many respects, but it reflects a stereotype of the time, and perhaps one that still persists of the Irish as having this particular propensity to violence, and you find it across. I mean, this is a short from MGM, but if you look across that period, the 1930s, the gangster genre, for example, where you find people like James Cagney, probably most famously associated with the violent kind of Irish American criminal. So there was that association that this is connecting with. But it's also part of a larger context around sport and film in that period, in the 30s. You have great sport films in that period, like Harold Lloyd's The Freshman or the Marx Brothers, Horse Feathers, Buster Keating's College. And typically they use sport there's the suggestion of violence, but there's also a lot of comedy. They're using it for the comic potential, and it's within that context as well. Because here, there is that really problematic suggestion of violence, and you associated with hurling, and the GAA were very unhappy, as you can imagine, at the time, and there was protests to the censor and to the company involved at the time by the GAA about the film, and it was apparently heavily edited. I'd imagine that last scene of the players all lying dead on the field.
It's funny.
It is funny, and that's the context within which they were coming to it. It's a very different context in terms of Irish America and the way in which Irish America was evolving, of course, in this period, and was moving from. If you go back to the 19th century, where Irish people, you've heard the famous remarks about the signs, no blacks, no Irish. The Irish were kind of marginalised within American society. But in this period, there's the movement of the Irish and Irish America to the centre. And one of the strategies there was to turn previously negative stereotypes into more positive stereotypes. So you have the movement of the fighting associated with the Irish, which was seen as a kind of a threat to the mainstream American life, to it being seen ultimately as a sign of perseverance and of overcoming. And you have the Fighting Irish now, Notre Dame, for example. And it's in that context that you're encountering these films where you're never really threatened by what you see. You're more amused by what you see in these films, and it's diffusing the kind of negative associations through comedy.
Exactly, and that's the whole point of satire, isn't it? Is to sort of diffuse that. Another one I want to play here, it's from 1958. It's Rooney. Shame on me for never seeing this before, because I found it absolutely brilliant, and maybe I'm kind of feeding into the anti-Irish stereotype of finding this hilarious. Here's one of the scenes. It involves a hurling match.
Blind or mad? Throw that big muck pusher off the field!
That was no foul.
That's Rooney nearly scalped the lad. And hasn't he got hair in his head a foot long? I tell you, it was a dirty foul. You wouldn't have taken a mowing machine to scalp him. Who says so? Stop crying and take a baiting like a man.
All right, I'll give you a bigger one myself.
Are you talking to me, are you?
I'm talking to any of you chicken-headed men who cares to listen to me.
Hey, is that the whistle? It was. Oh, somebody handed me a clout in there that's deafened me for life.
I'm sure I'm in for another black guy, and I just got rid of the first one. Who won the match?
I'm far too gone with the thirst to care. Listen, doesn't think you listen to sack. Come on, let's have a drink.
And we'll drink to Rooney. But if it wasn't for him, we wouldn't have had an argument at all.
We'll get that back. It's if you want to check it out, it's Rooney. It's fully available online. It's from 1958. Filmed at St. Vincent's, was it, that particular scene?
Yes, it was. And it was that extraordinary Dublin player, Desi Snitchy Ferguson, that introduced John Gregson, the Liverpool-born actor who plays the hero of the story, James Ignatius Rooney, introduced him to hurling and unfortunately with very little success. One of the things, the less convincing aspects of our film in particular are the hurling sequences, because they're trying to bring in this guy who wasn't really familiar with the sport and to train him up and it really doesn't work. But there's other elements. In terms of capturing Dublin in the 1950s, I think it's still a fascinating record of that period. The way in which this is one of the things that was criticised, as you can imagine, at the time, was that that association of hurling with violence.
Does that stereotype change throughout the years after Rooney, or does it change at all from what you've seen?
It changes in the sense that, thankfully, from the 40s on, the Indigenous, as in Irish-made productions, increasingly were focusing on Gaelic Games. In a way, we could say we had the opportunity to film our own games and bring an authenticity and integrity to that, which wasn't about using them to affirm or to connect with stereotypes like this one here of violence and fighting, but about capturing the central role that these sports play in Irish life. And that's the National Film Institute, for example, and the work that they did, and subsequently the work of Gail Lynn, and right through to more recent extraordinary documentary filmmakers like Pat Comer, for example, and the work he's done. But in terms of international productions, regrettably, you still find the legacy of that association. I'm thinking of a relatively recent production like Blitz with Jason Statham.
We might actually have a look at Blitz now, because this comes with a warning of extremely strong language in this particular clip. But take it away, Jason Statham.
Okay, lads. Fuck up, old man.
Come on, there you git.
I'll smash her head in.
Yeah, give us your fucking wallet, you cunt. Sort this fucker out. Come on in.
This, lads, is a hurling. Used in the Irish game of hurling. Cross between hockey and murder.
Why don't I carve my name in your fucking face?
Hold on.
Give me the fucking leg. Fucking go!
And is that a carpet knife?
Stick it.
Jesus wept. Been looking for one of these for like weeks. But this carpet just keeps turning up. A word of advice, girls. You're picking the wrong fight. At least pick the right weapon.
Always said Jason Statham will make a fine cornerback. That is Blitz, and a cross between hockey and murder. The line there about hurling, which is it's a great line, to be fair. But clearly, my question about has the view of GAA being a very violent sport, has that changed over the years? Clearly not.
Not in the perspective of the more kind of international mainstream genre films. It still is kind of employed in that context, unfortunately.
What's the best film that is spoken about in this movie, in your view? What's your favourite piece of work that involves Gaelic Games?
God, I think, we'd look at it from the point of view of different forms of film, and if I was to pick, in terms of fiction and Gaelic Games, probably still Clash of the Ash, Fergus Tighe's film from 1987, which is, it's made from somebody who's very, very close to the sport, who knows the sport intimately, who grew up playing it in Cork, and is bringing that kind of knowledge to the filming of the sport, the capturing the importance of sport within a small community, but also as an insight to Irish society in a very dark period in the 1980s, a period marked by very high immigration, unemployment, lack of opportunity, and that's all kind of beautifully rendered within the film itself.
Yeah, it certainly is. And if I had to pick one, it would definitely be A Year Till Sunday. And I know you've mentioned Pat Comer there as well.
I was going to come to documentary, so that would be my documentary pick in terms of definitely. And A Year Till Sunday is kind of it's a turning point as well in terms of the depiction of Gaelic Games, and that it literally brings us into the dressing rooms and brings us into it. There's a level of intimacy in terms of how the insight it gives us that only somebody on the panel who was in there and in the midst of it all could give. But you find the filming of Gaelic Games subsequently, and Pat has continued to be key, and in fact he's a series on RT1 at the moment on the GAA. That movement into more intimate, more insightful perspectives on Gaelic Games you find emerging subsequently and increasingly in television from the late 90s onwards.
It'd be great if the access wheel could kind of turn back around and more things like A Year Till Sunday would start to emerge, because the Blues Sisters documentary, for example, made last year was outstanding as well, kind of the same sort of level of access, which kind of leads to brilliant insight, as you say. Listen, it's called Gaelic Games and Film. It's by Seán Crosson, who's in studio with us this morning. It's fantastic, Seán, and congratulations on it. Thank you for popping in.
Thanks a million.
Loads of great footage there, and Jason Statham clearly the inspiration for Dublin MEP candidate Ben Gilroy's video, which I'm sure you've seen at this point, where he walks out with a hurl and smashes corruption and a bunch of other things too. But Jason Statham did it first, and actually probably did it better, you'd have to say, wouldn't you?
Not sure about that. Yeah, he definitely did. I wonder, did they actually get a hurler in to actually train him in terms of the proper hurling swing, the proper wristy way to...
And Gilroy or Jason Statham?
Well, both. Both wristy users of a hurl, I think is the technical term.
All right, that's our lot today. Podge Collins got caught in traffic, so that's going to come to you tomorrow on OTB AM instead. We're back live on News Talk and all our social channels from 7 o'clock. But more importantly, the Off the Wall Take, aka Andy Lee's Game of Thrones show on the finale, is coming up later on today. When is it going to go live?
Tonight at some point, or perhaps even earlier, because we've been keeping it until after the episode on a Monday. It is after the episode on a Monday now.
Andy had just too many thoughts to process after the final show. We had to give him 24 hours just to filter it all out properly, so it will come out in a coherent stream this evening whenever that happens. We're back live tomorrow from 7:30. It's our new start time, so tell everybody that you need to get up 15 minutes early, and we're going to be there for you on your commute or with your breakfast, wherever it is. If you ever want to just listen to us as a radio show, you can just go onto offtheball.com and hit the listen button, and that's a live, continuous stream of sports content coming your way. We're very excited. We'll see you tomorrow. Good luck.